Hello everyone, MonkeyBot here, and today we're going to be talking about the next faction that's going to be in the Tides of Torment DLC, and that's the Slaanesh faction. So about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were talking about the Norscan faction and the potential faction rework and the new start locations that could be coming in the Tides of Torment DLC. And now it's time to talk about the Slaanesh faction and what legendary lords are going to be introduced in the DLC, their potential start locations, and a minor rework that I'm hoping to see for the Slaanesh faction. Now, if you are enjoying my content, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we're going to get straight into the Slaaneshi rework. Now, I don't think Slaanesh is going to have as big as a rework as some of the other factions we've had in previous DLCs, and definitely not as big as the Norscan rework, but there is one element of the current implementation of Slaanesh which I just think needs a massive tweak, and that's the seductive influence mechanic and the whole vassalized system in general. Now, the other 3 Chaos Gods, you have access to the mechanics straight away, and throughout your campaign they progress and get stronger and stronger and stronger. So Khorne, you can immediately start raiding settlements and gain more armies as you raise those settlements. Nurgle, you start off with those plagues, and then the more infections you get over the course of your campaign, they get stronger and you can have more of them. With Tzeentch, you start off with changing of the ways that you can activate immediately, and through the technology tree you can get more of those changing of the ways as you progress through the campaign. And then it comes to Slaanesh. So the problem I have with the seductive influence is that it just doesn't have an impact at the beginning of your campaign, or in fact it doesn't have an impact on your faction specifically until you vassalize that faction, and then it's just a normal vassal. And because some of these factions, particularly the ones with legendary lords, take so long to do, it's never the optimal way to play the game. In fact, you're more feeling like a weaker version of Khorne, where you just go around killing everyone and taking everyone's territory. So we now need to find a way to incentivize this and make it more bearable to try and seduce these factions. So your seductive influence is meant to represent Slaanesh slowly taking over these territories to then become fully dedicated to Slaanesh. So we need some sort of progressive system where you gain benefits over time depending on how much seductive influence you have on a certain faction. So right now, when you get to 25%, all that happens is that faction that is being seduced gains diplomatic penalties against autotide factions and diplomatic buffs against chaotic factions, which doesn't benefit you whatsoever, except it's easier to get trade agreements and alliances, but you're never going to get an alliance with any of the autotide factions anyway, so it just doesn't make any sense. So now we need to swap that. We need to change that over to give the buffs over to the Slaanesh faction. So we're going to change this. So at 25% now, you will be able to get a campaign movement range when within that seducted faction's territory, adding some battle buffs, maybe some melee attack bonuses, maybe some ward save or extra physical resistance would be good as well. And then when the seductive influence goes to 50%, I would like to see replenishment in that specific faction's territory. So when Nakari is wandering around Altharion, for example, and he's at 50% seduction, Nakari's armies should start replenishing naturally within that territory. And then at 75%, I would like to introduce a upkeep reduction, a really hefty upkeep reduction of 50% for those armies, but only within that territory. And then finally, at 100%, you can get that vassalization with the existing buffs that were implemented beforehand. So then that way it would be easier to defend your new vassal's territory with all of your hefty new buffs. And I think that's all that's needed, to be honest, to rework Slaanesh. I don't think it needs that much. It just needs its main mechanic to feel a little bit more impactful, and I think that would just solve the whole thing. Now that's the basic Slaanesh rework out of the way, it's time to talk about the new legendary lords that will be implemented within the Tides of Torment DLC. We'll start talking about the legendary lord we know of for sure, and that is T'Challa. We don't know much about her mechanics in the game, but we know from her lore that she produces this special liquids that people kind of get deadly addicted to. She uses that liquid to control people at her will. So this is definitely something that's going to be implemented into some form of mechanic, and this is how I would like it to be implemented. And I would like her to gain control of her defeated enemies. So this is how I think it's going to work. I think that you're going to go in as normal and attack an enemy army, and then once you have defeated that army, I think that we're going to get some sort of countdown, very similar to how Be'lakor has it with his undivided Demon Prince mechanic, where he can turn a human into an undivided Demon Prince, and this timer will then start. This will then give the enemy army a chance to attack back and defeat one of T'Challa's armies to then stop the countdown and set them free. If this countdown does hit 0, however, that army will then be fully controlled by T'Challa. The entire thing, all the troops, all the heroes, the only thing that can't be controlled will be legendary lords, so then they will be replaced with a generic lord, and this army will then be fully controlled by T'Challa to do with as she pleases. And not only will it end there, but after you have taken control of this army, you will then be able to set it out and deal damage to your enemies. And when defeating enemies with this army, you will then gain some resource to then buff and enhance any future armies that you will be able to seduce with this mechanic. So at the beginning, these armies will be nothing special. They will just be a regular army that you take over, has no replenishment. It will decay over time, but you need to dish out as much damage as possible. The other catch is that it has to also be in the same province as T'Challa, so you can't just throw it out anywhere. This will then simulate the whole continuing to drink her liquid to be controlled forever, and if they go too far away from her, they will take increased attrition by going mad and start killing each other. Over the course of your campaign, you can use this special liquid that you will gain from using these armies to destroy other armies, and then you will be able to remove these negative effects, eventually being able to replenish in your own territory, not gaining so heavy attrition, having upkeep reduction, and so on and so forth. So now we've got the general idea of what her mechanics will be like. Let's start talking about her start location. Now, this start location is kind of a little bit tricky for me because we know that she's originally a high elf, and I don't really want to put her near Ulthuan because N'Kari is already there. The only option to put her in Ulthuan would be then to move N'Kari somewhere else, but it also doesn't make sense to move N'Kari anywhere else because he's always invading Ulthuan. So this start location is quite difficult to pinpoint for me. However, I have come up with a settlement that could be quite good for her, and I've taken inspiration from her End Times lore, which means she'll be starting very, very close to Ind. So I have downloaded the Immortal Empires expanded mods just to get a little bit more of a visual on what I'm trying to talk about here. So we've got the Kingdom of Ind over here. Obviously, I would love the entire country to be implemented in the next DLC patch, but the way things are going, I don't have high hopes for it. But I would like to see a little bit of an expansion, at least into the mountains bordering Ind over here. And we do have the City of Spires here, which is one of the modded cities, so the name is subject to change. But this general location here, I think, would be an excellent start for T'Challa. So pushing through into the mountains over here, obviously these enemies are subject to change. So they may not be Ogre Kingdoms, they may not be Dwarfs, they may be another faction. But then that puts you up against Gelt over here, being your first legendary lord to fight. I think this would be a really interesting start. We've only got one Slaanesh start location at the moment, and it's just high elves, high elves, high elves, and then later on dark elves. So it's a little bit boring. So going up against some other new enemies would be great, and also giving Cathay just that additional threat, because the Cathay campaign is it's too easy in my opinion. The two legendary lords that you got over here, you just take out Snitch very easily because you have so much money over here as Zhao Ming that you just can roll over everything. So adding an additional threat over here down south, I think, would be a great addition to the Immortal Empires campaign. So now that we've got T'Challa out of the way, it's time to talk about the FLC Legendary Lords that I think the community has already decided that's coming with this DLC, and that is the Mask, just so we can get that third Legendary Lord for Slaanesh. And this starting location is quite difficult to pinpoint because she could literally start anywhere on the campaign map. But I've come up with something that I think will be a great addition for the Immortal Empires map, and that is the settlement known as the Altar of Facades. So the Altar of Facade is located on the eastern part of the southern chaotic wasteland. So you will start off in this minor settlement here, and you will start pushing out west. I do believe that the Nurgle faction will just expand a little bit to take these territories, being your starting enemy. So you'll push these Nurgle factions out of the way until you meet up with Kairos. At that point, you can either get an alliance, which you will likely do because you share a starting enemy, or you can declare war on him and start taking over the rest of the chaotic wastelands. From this point on, you can either push up the eastern part of the southern jungles over here, going up against the Skaven, meeting up against your last defenders, which will potentially be your first legendary lord that you will encounter as an enemy, pushing up here against Khalida and the vampires, and starting to make your way up into the Badlands. Alternatively, you can move to the Eastern Isles. Finally, they will be getting some action in Immortal Empires. And from there, if Ind has been expanded all the way, you can then start pushing your way up into Ind, meeting up with T'Challa over here, either confederating her or then joining the war onto Cathay. I do think it's going to be a relatively safe campaign, both the campaign that we have in game right now and the one that I am suggesting for T'Challa are quite challenging campaigns. You have a lot of enemies surrounding you and very little people to help you out, but in this instance you do have a nice ally that you could join up with Kairos, giving you a nice little buffer to help you out through the rest of your campaign. And you will face a lot new enemies as well. You don't often face off against greenskins, dwarves, lizardmen, and so on and so forth. So having that enemy variety, I think, will be a very good change for Slaanesh. And that is all the changes I think we'll be getting for Slaanesh. I don't think N'Kari is going to get anything special apart from the general Slaanesh rework that we discussed about earlier in the video. Yes, I am aware about the delays for Tides of Torment. When starting recording this video, the news hasn't been announced yet, but yes, I am aware about it now. It is slightly disappointing that we're only going to get one DLC this year. The content for the game is definitely slowing down and says to me that it's coming towards the end of Warhammer 3's life cycle, which is a shame. I would love a lot more content to be added into this game, but hopefully Warhammer 40k will be on the horizon so we can just move on to there. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you very much for watching this video. Let me know what you think about this Slaanesh rework. Would you like to see some other changes implemented for Slaanesh, or do you think these changes are perfect for them? And let me know about the start locations. Would you like to see those two legendary lords in different start locations? That's going to be it for this one. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye for now.